One summer, I was involved in a conservation project in a remote wilderness area. As part of a crew doing manual labor in hard-to-reach places, we spent 2 weeks trekking in various isolated places. In this particular case, we were establishing new hiking and biking trails at the rear of a designated wilderness area in the high desert. The nearest town, home to only 35 people, was a 3-hour drive through sandy terrain where the tracks remained forever. Halfway through our stay, around 12:30 at night, everyone else went to their tents and I stayed behind to read. The surroundings were dark due to clouds of stars, and my headlight was probably the only source of light within a 38-mile radius. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by the sound of footsteps circling around our camp and heading towards the tents from the public tent where I was. The lack of a light source and the steps walking away from the tents and not towards them immediately alerted me. After a few seconds, I dropped the book, stood up and turned the corner of the tent, illuminating the sleeping area with a flashlight. The sound stopped, but visible footprints in the dirt told a different story. They seemed to come from one end of the camp, looked into my tent, made their way through the sleeping tents and continued out of the camp. Whether my movements were too noisy or not, the rest of the team woke up and began asking about the commotion inside their tents. After explaining my discovery, they joined me to examine the boot prints in the dirt. To our surprise, they turned out to be an almost perfect copy of my boots, with one small discrepancy. A stone stuck in the soles broke the symmetry. Given that I was wearing fairly ordinary work boots other than a US size 15 double wide, there was no plausible explanation for any of the crew members being responsible. That night, sleep eluded us, and we were overcome with a terrible anxiety. After that mysterious night, no more sightings or sounds were heard. A subsequent light rain erased the tracks within a couple of days, but I remember that neither of us wanted to step directly on the prints, preferring instead to walk around them as if avoiding cracks in the sidewalk. In the past, I did night cleaning at a horribly old movie theater. We started our shift at 5 a.m. and worked until the doors opened at 12 a.m. To optimize time and make things easier, we would sometimes arrive when the last films were ending and simply spend the night in one of the forgotten theaters to ensure that we would be there when the next shift started. Our task involved using noisy electric leaf blowers to cut a path up and down the hallways of each theater, blowing popcorn and debris all the way down to the bottom. We then had to manually clean the seats of all sorts of gross and even mystical debris. This was a reasonable approach, but the work was so noisy that sometimes you could get lost in the noise and forget about something important. Of course, the lights in the cinema halls were on to make our work easier, and usually at that time we were alone there. However, when something strange happened, we tried to blame it on the other guy. But in this grim world of night cleaning, there was one strict rule. No one enters the projection booth. We didn't even think about going up there. There was nothing to clean there. All our supplies were downstairs, and most importantly, according to rumors, an ominous ghost lived there. An interesting phenomenon with projection booths is that despite everything, you always feel like someone is watching you. Walking through a dark and silent cinema hall, the noise of the fans made it absolutely silent. Accidentally looking towards the booth, you can see someone standing there and watching you. It's especially scary when you walk out into the hallway and see the other guy working in his movie room. But it's doubly surprising when you both head to the exits of the cabin and catch the one who was there. But there is no one inside. We resolutely avoided getting involved with this strange phenomenon and left the projection booth alone, as if something unclean was lurking in it. Another night watchman. In a dark office tower in the city, where the light of the lanterns penetrated the thick clouds like ghostly invitations to evil spirits. My name was Tom, and from that night, my life changed forever. My working day began as usual at 22 o'clock. The entire office was empty and the lights flickered smoothly like rising darkness. I was alone, facing a cold monitor and tasks that seemed never-ending. Time passed slowly, like a series of terrible dreams that can attract the attention of even the strongest souls. The gray corridors were silent. Only my footsteps and the faint light of my flashlight created flickering shadows on the walls, like ominous ghosts waiting in the corners. Everything was quiet until I heard a distant click-o in the corridor. I stopped, listening intently, but silence reigned again. The footsteps started again, this time somewhere in the distance. Involuntarily, I walked towards the sound, the flashlight illuminating the dark corners like an explorer in a forbidden zone. The steps became closer, but their owner remained in the shadows, eluding my attention. Suddenly, everything became quiet, and I felt a chilling wind on my back. Werewolf fear gripped me when I heard the whisper. A voice whispered my name, calling me into the dark depths of the office. "Tom," it whispered, like an echo of past nightmares. Determined to confront my fear, I moved forward, following this mystical call. The office rooms began to take on a new shape in the flickering light. But suddenly the lantern went out, and I found myself in complete darkness, deprived of my only ally. There was a whisper in the depths of the black office. "Tom, we're here." The shadows soared up the wall like a devilish dance, creating ominous plays of light and shadow on the floor. I felt a cold touch on my shoulder, and my gaze fell on a pair of brilliant eyes sparkling in the darkness. Worry gripped my heart when suddenly there was a noise behind me. Turning around, I saw silhouettes merging with the shadows, rising from the dark corners. These were the ghosts of past workers, souls that could not find peace. They were getting closer, and I felt fear curl its cold fingers around me. The whispers grew louder, like a choral piece of dead souls. They rose into the air, surrounding me as if wanting to take me into their possession. There was a scream in the darkness, and I woke up sitting in my office chair. It was morning, and everything was fine. My hand shook as I wiped the sweat from my forehead, trying to figure out if this was just a nightmare. But that fear, that mystical call in the shadow of the past, remained with me. I was left alone in the office, but something awakened inside me that could not be defeated by either light or shadow.